name is Federikas Longinotti-Buitoni. I am the founder of Collecto, a homeware retailer and wedding registry, curating a selection of different homeware brands from different parts of the world. And we're really excited to be innovating in this, wedding space and design space in general.
Federica, thank you so much for making time join us on the Ivy podcast. Always exciting to talk to fellow entrepreneurs, especially here in South Florida. Before we dive in and talk a little bit more about your current company that you're building, give us a thumbnail version of your career prior to that.
Of course. So I started my career in fashion. I always felt and knew that I wanted to be in fashion. So I worked for designers Oscar de la Renta and Salvatore Ferragamo. And then when I graduated from college, I went to school in Boston. I moved to New York. I always knew I wanted New York. And I started working at a luxury online retailer called Moda Operandi. The company was it was a wonderful experience. It's a very high growth company. And I was there for 5 years, and it really, allowed me to explore different areas of the luxury world and, learn a lot about growing a business. So that's where I was before launching Collecto. And after Moda, I decided I always wanted to do an MBA. So I went to Wharton at the University of Philadelphia for 2 years. And after Wharton, I started Collecto.
Wow, that's super exciting. And it seems like you had a very diverse journey to that. So tell us a little bit more about the current company that you're building. What problem are you solving? And how did you decide on that?
Yeah. So it was really a personal journey, and that's how I started Collecto. So I was putting together my own wedding registry. I was getting married and going through the process of planning my wedding and planning my wedding registry. And I just felt very underwhelmed with the options available. I thought, I had experience in the retail world, and I knew that there were so many, interesting brands and designers out there to build that I wanted, to have on my new home, but the platforms weren't really reflecting that. The platforms were very much traditional and offered, the same brands, most of them very commercial. And so it was great because it really was something that I went through personally. So that's when I decided I wanted to innovate in this wedding industry. So we started as wedding registry, and shortly thereafter we launched e-commerce as well, because we started seeing interest from people that weren't necessarily, getting married or building their registries, but that were looking really for a platform with highly curated homeware. And so that's another channel that we started exploring. It's been a wonderful journey. It's been, growing the company organically has been incredible, because it has really allowed me to see what the gaps in the market are, and, with time grow in different channels. We're bringing, Collecto is a source of discovery and inspiration for people, for young couples that are looking to build a new home, or for people that are looking to revamp their homes. We really, travel the world to make sure that we're bringing brands that have the highest quality of material, that have, these very particular processes of production, the craftsmanship, the heritage of the brand. So these are all things that we really value when it comes to the brands that we bring on board to the platform. And really our goal is to be, the curator for them, and really make it very easy and seamless for them to kind of, select from an array of so many products that exist out there, to really select the best from the best and build either their registries or their homes with brands that we represent.
That's very interesting, and thank you for sharing that. And obviously, to build something like this, you cannot do this alone. So to be able to build a team of top performers and attract the top talent is always a challenge, especially in this highly competitive market. Share your thoughts on talent acquisition. How do you go about hiring? How do you go about strategies to attract the top talent to your team?
Yeah, no, and you're really right, Jan. I think uh, whenever I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs, that's a challenge that constantly comes up. And we actually hired our first employee actually a month and a half ago. So that was really exciting. And I I've thought through this, and I think that sharing, what helped me was constantly sharing my passion for what I'm doing. And I'd love to share the story of how Sydney, her name is Sydney, came across, because I was working at WeWork, and someone introduced us because she used to work at a company also in the wedding industry. And we grabbed a coffee, we chatted a little bit, and then fast forward almost 2 years after the pandemic, she reached out to me saying that she was transitioning and she loved Collecto and she wanted to be involved. So I think that really being able to share that passion, like I absolutely love what I do, and I'm so grateful to be able to wake up every day and do something that I love. And I think that people can really feel that, and people get very excited when you share all of these opportunities and ideas and plans that we have for Collecto. So on my personal experience, that's something that really helped me really be passionate about what I'm doing and sharing it with as many people as I can, because at the end of the day, maybe that person today is at a great place, but like what happened to me, in a year they'll remember and they'll come back to you. So I think that's something that's really important.
Right, right, absolutely. And when it comes to interviewing, that's a space that's very interesting to me, because it's very complicated and it's a lot of variables are part of that. Share your thoughts on how do you interview candidates? What do you look for in the responses when you hear them, and what is your overall approach to that?
So I try to keep the first conversations as informal as possible. And when I'm interviewing a person for the first time, or having that conversation for the first time, what I'm really trying to look into is that person's, values, and how passionate they are about what we're doing, and, what they're even not only passionate about Collective, but what their passions are. And just sort of that energy. I think especially when we're such a small team, that energy and that connection on a personal level is very, very important, because it's someone that I'm going to start working with on a daily basis, and that just needs to make sense in terms of things that I always like, because the resume, we can always look at the resume and we can always ask the typical question, walk me through your resume. The person has that, kind of memorized, so it's like, I don't need to know that. I can read that when you send me your CV. When I'm interviewing people, I'm really trying to read between the lines and kind of, see again what their values are, what they love. I love asking questions about what they love doing, and that really allows me to see how passionate of a person they are. And I think that's so important, because when you have personal passions for a few things, that means that you're someone that is gonna get excited about what we are doing, and it's gonna I think that passion is gonna come across in different aspects of your life. So I think that's, of course, besides the questions about talking about challenges or weaknesses or successes, or being a team player. All of those things are of course absolutely important, but some of the things like outside of the box that I really try to dig deep and understand is that kind of like their values, their passions, and that energy connection that I think for me is super important to feel when I bring someone on board.
Right, right, absolutely. Those are definitely very interesting observations, and we could probably spend the rest of the episode talking about something like this because it's so complicated. When it comes to innovation, building and fostering the culture of innovation, whether it's a fully established organization or a startup that's just launching, I think it's one of the imperatives for success, to continuously evolve, continuously innovate. Share your thoughts on that particular space, and how do you go about building that culture of innovation at your company?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think some of the things that are happening in, the world of particular wedding registries and tabletop in general when it comes to innovation that we're, seeing, and it happened to me, was the idea that couples are really looking at their weddings, at their registries from a very different perspective now, and they're putting a lot of thought and meaning into the selection of products that they're doing. And that's something, again, that's what I went through. I wanted something very personal. I wanted to select products and brands that spoke to my aesthetics, that spoke to who I was, that spoke to the way I like to live and entertain. And that's something that, is really a priority at Collecto, really always thinking about the client and how can we make this experience better. And one of the ways is, through the curation, being very thoughtful about it. So I think, millennials in general, these younger generations, are all about putting more meaning into their lives in every aspect of the way. And I think they're starting to do this when it comes to their weddings as well, not only their registries, but their weddings in general. To give you an example, there's some traditions that are just so established, like, wearing a white dress or walking down the aisle, or, there's things that at the end of the day, that wedding day is your day and should reflect who you are as a couple, as a person. It should really show your truest self. And so I think, couples are really steering away from these traditions that have been around forever, and kind of doing it their way. And that also, pertains to the registries. They're starting to curate their registries, based on what they love, based on how they love to entertain. And that's actually a service that we launched recently and that we're starting to explore, with couples, because, helping them, guide them through this thought process of the selection, and what to select, what not. Again, everything with purpose and a lot of meaning. Going back to your question of innovation and like how to foster a culture of innovation, I think, one of the most important things for me is to kind of remove yourself from the day-to-day and what we're doing on a constant basis. Because when we're just thinking about, the operations, the merchandising, it's very hard to kind of think about, out of the box ideas and things that we can do to help our customers. I think, fostering a culture where it's okay to take time, to think about things and take time off. And I think that, we're seeing this movement of, work-life balance, and that's just very, cliche work-life balance. But when you think about it, in my personal experience, that's when really, my best ideas come through, when I am completely removed and I, go to a museum or go to an exhibition or something that stimulates me, or a new town or city. I think I think that's something that is underestimated. And I think that really, really helps with innovation, just being able to remove yourself and kind of think about things in a very different way.
Yeah, I love that. I love those perspectives on innovation. Is something that I'm very interested in, to understand different strategies to build and foster such environments. Because a lot of times innovation is misconceived with something grandiose, something that's transformational, but a lot of times it could be in the form of simple process improvements. So that's always very interesting. What's your content diet looking like? What do you consume on daily basis to keep yourself informed, entertained, be ahead of the curve on all the things happening in your industry?
Oh man, so much. Yeah. So Architectural Digest, for example, is a great publication that talks, it's not only visually inspiring, but a publication that has so much knowledge about the design industry in general and new trends. I think, Medium is also a blog that I love for like, more like marketing ideas and seeing what things are doing. Podcasts are definitely a top, so that's why I was so excited to be a part of it, because I really think that podcasts really let people, and hearing these entrepreneur stories is just so amazing and so inspiring. And I think there's so much knowledge to be shared that when you listen to even someone that is doing something completely different from what Collecto is doing and in a completely different industry, there's always something to learn. So I think podcasts like How I Built This or Masters of Scale, or on a design level, Cherish, Domino, I think that's something that is also very easy to consume. So when I'm exercising, when I'm driving, that's a great way to consume easy content. And then books, of course, I'm passionate about reading. I read a lot about a lot of different things, and that's just such a important source of knowledge. So
Right, absolutely. In terms of career advice or series of career advice that you had received throughout, maybe at your early stages, that you continuously refer back to and maybe even share with others, talk a little bit more from that perspective.
yeah. So particularly related to Collecto, people always told me like, launch quickly, don't worry about it. And I went through it, and then someone recommended The Lean Startup, which is a book that I always recommend to people that are looking to, start a company. That's something that someone told me, and it was so hard for me to actually do it, because when I was launching Collecto, this was my baby. It was something that I had to show it to the world in the way that I felt made sense, in a way that was aesthetically aligned with who I was, or with what I wanted it to be. And the advice was always like, launch quickly. If you launch something perfect, you've launched too late. And after my first big launch, I realized that that's so important, and that's something that we do constantly. It's more about getting things out there, launching ideas, than launching the perfect marketing campaign or the perfect post or blog, or many different things. And I applied again to everything, because I just think that if you don't try and you take so much time to do something so perfectly, it might be too late, or you might realize that you're dedicating so much time to something that is not gonna call people's attentions and so forth. So I think that that's something that throughout Collecto I've really tried to implement.
Right, absolutely. I love that. Last but not least, what book are you currently reading, and is there a book that you always recommend to others, and why is that?
I'm currently reading a book called Grit by Angela Hayworth. I don't know if you've read it. So a friend of mine recommended it, and it's all about how passion and perseverance really helps people push forward and continue doing what you're doing. And I love it, because it helps me see that this is all a long term, we can't see this as like a 5-year thing. What I'm doing is something that I want to do in the long term. It's something that I'm lucky to say I'm super passionate about, and I've always been, the design industry, the luxury industry. So doing, building a career doing something that you're passionate about makes the world of a difference, because it's something that you're going to continue doing and continue pushing, and connected to innovation. Innovation doesn't happen from one day to another. Innovation happens by seeing things happen day to day, year to year, and then you start discovering and uncovering the deeper you go into what you're doing. So I really love it. I recommend it. Books that I recommend, always Dale Carnegie. I don't know if you've read How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's, a book that I just, try to read as much, every few years, because there's always something new. And my husband Giuliano actually recommended the book, and the first time, he's a genius when it comes to, relationships and making friends. And it just, I think that's that's why I'm building Collecto, is really to build relationships and friends. And that's a book that really resonates with me.
Well, that's super exciting, and thanks for sharing that. We'll make those titles available in the show notes. Federica, I can't thank you enough for this very short and insightful conversation. I personally learned quite a bit, and looking forward to staying in touch. So thanks so much for your time today.
Of course, thank you so much. Yeah, and take care.